And now,
breaking news.
Ahoy, the news.
News.
From the Weird Wire.
News of the Weird Wire, a day in the life of corporate America. We can imagine that countless idioms and turns of phrases are butchered on a daily basis. There is a word for this. It's called malaprop, or malapropisms. It's when you take two well-known sayings and you kind of mash them together. For instance, we need to talk about the elephant in the closet. Another saying is, there's demons in the closet. There's an elephant in the room. It's not a big deal, but Mike O'Brien, a recently retired Ford sales executive, kept track of every such malapropism that he had ever heard uttered by a coworker since 2014. And he wrote them on a whiteboard. There were 2,229 of them by the time he retired. The violations, which he called board words, were separated into categories including animals and food. Examples include, we need to talk about the elephant in the closet, and there's too many cooks in the soup instead of cooks in the kitchen. One colleague in particular was responsible for 184 of these entries, 3 of which specifically were related to sayings involving ducks. O'Brien himself was not immune to this. He had over 100 violations on the board that were reported by coworkers. Doesn't sound like they ever sold vehicles. Too many cooks in the soup. Speaking of animals, pet bird in Australia almost sent to the big birdcage in the sky after its home was invaded by a snake. It's reported by the Sunshine Coast Snake Catchers Service. They were called to a home that a coastal carpet python had slithered into. Naturally, the snake took great interest in the house's birdcage and the bird inside, and would have been able to make its way inside for a feathered lunch had the Sunshine Coast not gotten there in time. Saying, quote, unfortunately, many birds and other small animal cages are still sold regardless of whether they are snake-proof or not. In our industry, it's hard seeing so many families lose their pets because of this. Further proof of why I am not going to live there. If your bird cage or your hamster cage needs to be snake-proof, I'm not living there. They continued, it's important to remember that this is not something to be angry at the snake for. It cannot differentiate between wild birds and pet birds, and it's simply trying to feed itself. Evidently, you can continue to be mad at Sylvester the cat. Knows what he's doing. A putty tat. We go from a pet bird to a dachshund. Never doubt the hardiness of the Wiener dog. According to The Guardian, a miniature dachshund has survived for 16 months in the wild of South Australia's Kangaroo Island after getting loose from her pet parents. The nearly 9-pound Valerie first went missing in November of 2023. A year and a half later, the Kango Wildlife Rescue reports that first-hand accounts and video indicate that Valerie is kicking and appears to have a lot of energy. She runs at the first sign of humans or vehicles, and despite the best efforts of dedicated island locals, Valerie has been impossible to catch. Valerie's improbable survival tale is specifically surprising to her mom, Georgia, who describes her as, quote, an absolute little princess. She never left my side, Gardner says. This is not a very outside rough and tough dog. To think she even went one night outside in the rain, oh my gosh. Little dachshund running around the outback of South Australia. It's one thing that I would not expect to find in the wild. That bird in that birdcage can't do anything about a snake, but Valerie the dachshund can sure get away. That, my friends, is news of the Weird Wire.